So much better than Zoom. Hey everyone, welcome to You'll Probably Agree. And today we have the director of Hekla, a movie about acting and performance and expression and the sacrifice that goes into it. Written and directed by Michael Glover Smith. Michael, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a few years since I've done the show. I think Relative was the last time I was on here.
That's correct. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm glad to have an excuse to come back.
No, it's always a pleasure having you on. And one thing I noticed right away when your movie started is that it was that you dedicated it to David Lynch, who I think he passed out. Yeah, passed away last year. Why did you dedicate your movie to him?
Yeah, well, he's a filmmaker who's always been a big influence on me. Have been a fan of his work since I was 13 years old when I first watched Eraserhead and Blue Velvet, which is actually before Twin Peaks ever premiered.
Yeah.
When Twin Peaks came on in 1990, I was 14 years old, and I was so excited to watch it because I was a fan of his films. So he's been with me a long time. And of course, I've collaborated with Wendy Roby on my last two films, who is probably best known for playing Nadine Hurley on Twin Peaks. But here's what's funny. The entire time I was making this film, I never thought about Lynch's work consciously.
Mhm.
He died in the early part of 2025 when we were in the early stages of pre-production. We shot this movie in August of last year, which was not that long ago. And it was a 10-day shoot. And I never was thinking about any of his individual films. And then when we were editing the film in the fall and I was looking at the footage, I thought, this kind of reminds me of Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire in the sense that those movies show you what goes on in an actress's brain,
Mhm. Yeah,
which I
very much so.
love
Yeah.
about them. And they do a lot of other interesting things besides. I mean, they're not primarily about acting, but they do show you an actor's process. And so I just thought it would be a nice gesture to dedicate it to his memory.
Yeah, it's funny because there are things in there that remind me of a David Lynch film. One is there's the usage of black and white, which
Yep.
he would use on occasion, especially like when he would shoot something in film stock. Like The Elephant Man was actually shot on, 35 millimeter film stock, I think, which
Yeah.
you can tell the difference when it's actually shot on it and then like when it's like done digitally.
Yeah.
And this one sort of like it plays like inside of Hecla's head and outside of it where you see her doing an audition, but then like on the inside, you have like the whole sequence where she's stabbing herself in the heart and it's done in full color. What was the decision to kind of separate those two styles visually between black and white and color? Because
Um,
it did kind of give me some Inland Empire slash Eraserhead vibes a little bit.
well, I'm glad that you asked about the juxtaposition of color in black and white, but I do want to correct you. Hecla is not stabbing herself in the heart. She's actually removing
That was it.
daggers
Yeah.
from her heart. They're already there, and she's pulling them out, which is a very different thing than stabbing yourself. But I originally wanted to shoot the whole movie in black and white, and then my production designer, a very talented woman named Heather Kuhlman, said to me, Mike, Hecla is the most colorful character ever. And you have to figure out a way to get some color into this movie. And I realized she was right because Hecla does have a very colorful personality. She's very larger than life. And then I thought, oh, yeah, if it's mostly in black and white, but then when she's acting, we kind of can show these fantasy sequences of what's going on, in her inner world. And those sequences, if they're in color, that will make the color much more impactful. So that was kind of the logic.
Ah, okay. Um, one thing that you do with your movies that I really like is that uh, you like to promote them a lot in Chicago theaters rather than, just throwing it on Vimeo or, trying to fly around and take it from festival to festival and other places. Why do you like locally promoting your movies and distributing in that way?
Well, I like the theatrical experience. I mean, I think a lot of people of my generation think of a movie as something you see on a big screen in public with strangers in the dark. Because when I was growing up, that's how I experienced movies. I would watch films at home on VHS, but that was sort of like an inferior, facsimile of the big screen experience. So even today, I think, you know, I think I still love seeing movies on the big screen. There's a romance to it. Um, and that's how I want my films to be experienced. So I do a lot of promotion in Chicago. That's just because I live here, like I love traveling around with my film, but I think it's easier to get my films shown here because there's more of the local audience. There are a lot of people who, know who I am, and they know who the people I'm collaborating with are. We're getting ready to have, our local premiere at the Music Box. And from what I understand, tickets are selling extremely well. So it's going to be a packed house. And a big part of that is because this is a film about the Chicago acting community. And a lot of the actors are well known, for the stage work they've done, for the films they've done, for the television they've done. And they all have large social networks. So people want to come see this cast. And even after this screening, I'm going to try and get it shown as much as I can.
Yeah. And why do you like filming in Chicago? Because I think Relative also was filmed here, and there's a lot of benefits. So there's a lot of productions now that film in
Yeah.
Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people don't realize how vibrant the local, indie filmmaking scene is. There are a lot of great filmmakers here. And I think in recent years, it feels like it's getting stronger because I feel like a lot of indie filmmakers are collaborating with each other now when they weren't in the past. And just to give you one example from my film, I partnered with a production company called Sweet Void Cinema, which is a company run by a guy named Jack McCoy. And he basically crewed up my film. Like he kind of gave me the crew that I used. And our cinematographer is a great filmmaker and writer named Jose Perez. He
Mhm.
made, I don't know if you saw his film What Rhymes with Magdalena.
Mhm.
That premiered last year at the Chicago Latino Film Festival, and it's a really wonderful film about a day in the life of a young woman who's a poet. So it's kind of similar to Hekla in some ways, but different art form. But I really love that film, and Jose is the first DP that I've ever worked with who also is a director in his own right. And that was a great experience. So I think the more we work together and the more we share information with each other, the more we communicate with each other, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that filmmaking is a collaborative
Yeah.
experience, because it's not just one person putting a movie together. Like even with Steven Spielberg, as brilliant as he is, if he doesn't have John Williams and Yamish Kaminsky and Michael Kahn by his side, his movies aren't going to be as lavish as they are or were. Like, he's a little hit some rocky roads, but he still made some classics, that you can't take away from him.
Yeah.
What do you think it is that draws, because your movie's about actors, what do you think it is that people are so drawn to actors by? Because they don't really follow the lives of lawyers or doctors or teachers, but if
Yeah.
someone's an actor, they want to know everything about them.
Yeah, that's true. Even if the actor isn't famous, I mean, I think
Yeah.
actors just lead fascinating lives, because when you're acting, you're always being someone else, and that in and of itself is interesting. Like, writing this script was a lot of fun because, I wrote it for this actress, knowing that she can do a lot of different things. And then she basically, then I asked her to rewrite it so she could make it more her own. So you want to talk about collaboration? This was the best collaboration I've ever had because I consider her to be the co-author of this film. But specifically, what I love about actors is they have hard lives. They're constantly being rejected. They're constantly auditioning, and I just admire the strength that they have to have in it when they're constantly being rejected, and yet they still have to believe on some level that they're going to make it. Anybody who has that kind of spirit is someone that I love, and Liz in real life has that spirit, so I thought she would be perfect for this
Yeah.
character.
Yeah, how was that writing with someone else on the film? Because I believe your last movie you might have, I mean, it was so long ago since I saw it, but I think you wrote that alone. What's that like where you're actually not only writing with someone else, but you're actually writing with the person who's going to be the star of the film? Hopefully, she didn't try to Edward Norton the production and everything worked out pretty well.
Well, it was awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny what you said earlier about, Steven Spielberg is a genius, but he's not, the sole creative force behind his movies. He has a team of people that he's been working with for a long time. And I think a lot of younger filmmakers, and I myself have been guilty of this, they do subscribe to the auteur theory, the idea that the director is the sole author of the film. And I think when a lot of young filmmakers make their first film and their first couple films, they tend to feel insecure when dealing with the crew and sometimes when dealing with the cast, and they feel the need to kind of assert their authorship in a way, like in a very aggressive way, to kind of make up for the insecurity they feel. Like, I feel like I need to show everyone that I'm in charge and I know exactly what I'm doing, as a way to try to inspire confidence in their collaborators. I mean, I think I was that way on my first couple films. And then over time, I realized the more I encourage the people I work with to bring their ideas to the table and to flex their creative muscles, that's when I feel like I'm doing my job the best,
Yeah.
and so I loved, turning the script over to Liz and saying, rewrite it, do whatever you want. If there's anything in here you don't want to say, just cross it out. If there's anything you want to add, just add it. And I swear to God, Mike, I accepted all of her changes. I did not veto a single addition that she made.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's always like the best moments that happen in films are like the ones that sort of happen like as an agreement between the director, and the actors. Like I think a lot of the funny guy scene in Goodfellas was improvised
Yeah, that
or
was Joe Pesci just
yeah.
going nuts. Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
that's what won him the Oscar, was that one scene.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So how did you learn to sort of like maybe let go of your ego and be like, "Oh no, you know what? It's not just me." Cuz I think a lot of directors have to realize like one day like, "Oh yeah, that's right. I'm not James Cameron. I'm not going to learn how to, sink the Titanic or create the Blue People." So like how do I learn how to work with other people and how do I take ideas from people because sometimes people give some ideas you're like, "What?" And you gotta, like, politely reject them. How do you mix that all together in the job?
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think the most important thing to learn as a director is when to say yes and when to say no. Because you're right, you're not going to accept every idea. Um, but I do think that how I've learned to accept the contributions and to give up control is just through experience. Having done this now 5 times, 5 feature films that I've directed, I feel like the more I give up control, the better the end result is. And I'll give you another example from this movie. All of the fantasy scenes in color, I was not present when those were shot by choice. I mean, I could have been, but what happened was I hired a guy named Charles Borg to be the second unit director. And I basically told Liz that I wanted her to go off with him for 2 days before I came on board. And I wanted them to shoot scenes that could be, what's happening inside Hekla when she's auditioning. And I said, these are going to be color sequences. They're fantasies that are happening in her brain, and do whatever you want. I said, don't even tell me what you're going to do. Just do it. And then I said, and don't worry about it. If I don't like it, I just won't use it. And then when I saw the footage that they shot, I thought it was just extraordinarily beautiful. And I said, Liz, I'm using all of this. So, that having that degree of confidence in my collaborators, it's not something I could have done at the beginning of my career, but now I feel like the most important decision that a director makes is the decision of who to hire, who to collaborate with. And if you hire the right people, by which I mean not only the most talented people, but the people who understand what you want to do and who trust you. And if you also have mutual trust in them, then you really need to be hands off, let them do their thing. And it's almost like more like you're a coach at a sporting event. You're cheering them on to do their best work. That's how I view the role of a director.
Yeah. And when you're working with actors, how do you think? I'm pretty sure the answer to this is no, as it is for me as well. Why do you think actors could never be replaced with something like AI?
Oh my God. Well, I mean, what's frightening is they can technically be replaced. I mean, we've already seen it with extras. There's AI generated extras whenever you see a big crowd scene. The real question is, are we going to see AI full blown AI performances in commercial narrative cinema? I hope that it doesn't happen, because I don't believe, no matter how realistic an AI performer might look and sound, I don't believe you will ever fully believe as a viewer that what you're seeing is human.
Yeah, because everything
Something is
AI does
always
is
something's
yeah.
always going to be a little bit off.
Yeah, because AI just can replicate things that humans have created. So, you couldn't have like conversations like you did with Elizabeth, and you couldn't have created the scenes that you did with a robot. It wouldn't have that human element because it hasn't gone through the experiences that a person has that they can bring into a performance, but
Yeah, I agree
yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So what was Hekla's first audition in the film supposed to resemble? Because like it's about like her and this guy, and like their relationship is either already falling apart or is falling apart. How hard is it to act like within those scenes where you have to be so like at it with each other, but at the same time you're trying to dig for something deeper, so then it's not just like a scene where people are screaming at each other.
Well, I'll tell you a secret about that scene. The guy who plays her scene partner, Christian,
Yeah.
his name in real life is Connor Foley, and that is Elizabeth Stam's husband.
Oh, so that's where the motivation came from. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I no, I did make him audition. He did.
Yeah.
I didn't give him the part. He's not an actor now, but he did study acting at Roosevelt University. So that was his major, and now he's in audio production. But I kind of felt like if I cast, and it wasn't just him, it's other roles in the film too. If I cast people that Liz is close to in real life, that will make her performance better, because she's going to feel like she's surrounded by family, and she's going to be surrounded by people she trusts. So, the scene with her and her husband is very intense in the film. It's an argument scene, yeah, between two people who used to date one another. And the director of that scene asks them to touch each other. He says, Hekla, I want you to slap his hand out of the way. So, I knew that if I cast her husband, they would be so comfortable with each other that there would be no insecurity on either of their part about what happened when we shot the scene. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, I think a lot of times if actors aren't 100% comfortable with each other, they're worried about maybe what the other person might be thinking. And I knew that would not be the case with Liz and Connor.
Yeah, it definitely helps when they know each other that well, where it's like, oh, I can yell something at this guy and not worry about hurting his feelings, because I already did that earlier this afternoon. Where I no, but there is a certain point in the movie where Hekla is pushing her girlfriend away. Do you think she was doing it because of her ego, thinking only about herself and wanting to be on top? Or was she doing it because the life you have to live as an artist it kind of has that like whiplash scene where it's like, I gotta let you go in order for me to succeed? Like, why was she doing that at that point?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that you asked that question. I've done a lot of interviews and nobody has asked me that so far, but I'll tell you, I think it's a little bit of both. If you're an artist, you kind of have to be a little selfish. Every artist is married to their work. You have to believe in what you're doing, and you have to believe in it when other people don't believe in you. Otherwise you wouldn't be doing it. So you have to be a little bit selfish, because you're not only creating the work, you're also selling it. In this day and age, to be an artist is to be a hustler. And that's one of the things I wanted to get across. Hekla is a hustler. But having said all that, I think the most substantial change that Elizabeth made to the script as a writer was the scene you're describing. And Liz made Hekla more unlikable. Because, that scene, Hekla is being a little mean to Tyler, her ex. And because Tyler seems really upset. And Hekla is basically saying, I'm sorry, it's over. We are not right for each other. It's over. And that's kind of hard to watch. And, Hekla was a character in my last film, Relative. She was a college student. She was, going on a date with Benji. She seemed very carefree and happy and sweet. And here you're seeing a little, like a sharper side of her. And that's what Liz brought to the table as a writer. And I thought, man, this is so great, because it's true. I think a person in their 20s, they change a lot from when they're in college to, being out of college and being out in the world and working for a living and trying to make it as an artist. That can make you a little bit harder. And I think that's what Liz wanted to show. I think that's how Liz wanted to show Hekla's evolution.
Yeah, and how was it as a male filmmaker depicting a lesbian relationship? How are you like, all right, how do I write this to a point where people aren't going to be like, I'm a dude being like, oh yeah, chicks together.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, I have seen films that have that quality where I'm like, this is a little dubious. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's one kissing scene between Hekla and Tyler, and I don't think anybody who watches it is going to feel like it's titillating. It's basically a goodnight kiss between two characters who are on a first date. because it's a flashback to the beginning of their relationship. And we didn't have an intimacy coordinator, but Mary Tilden, who plays Tyler, did the choreography. She kind of talked to Liz and said, okay, is it okay if I put my hand here? And, where do you want to put your hand? That kind of thing. So, so they were very comfortable with each other. And, Mary is a lesbian in real life, in addition to being one in the film. And, there was one point where I asked her to do something, and I can't remember what it was, but it was during the party scene. And she looked at me and she goes, Mike, I would never do that in real life. And I said, oh, okay, well, what would you do then? And then she told me what she wanted to do. And I said, oh, we'll just do that then. So, I think if you're, I'm a straight white male filmmaker, but I don't want to make movies that are only about straight white men. That would be boring. Chicago is a very diverse city, and it's only realistic to have that diversity be reflected in a movie that I'm going to make here. So what I do is I listen to my actors, especially. If I'm showing someone who's a member of a marginalized community, I'm going to say, I'm going to encourage them to tell me what they want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it comes across, it doesn't come across as like titillating or something like some, it wasn't like Vampires of the Velvet Lounge, which was the worst movie
Yeah.
I've seen in the last 2 years. Which nobody has to see that movie. It's not even like funny bad, it's just bad. It makes Mortal Kombat look like Citizen Kane. So why did you include a narrator in the film? Was it to kind of give it a sort of like novelization aspect to it?
Yeah, exactly. The narration was always there from the very first draft. I wanted, because the film is so subjective in the sense that we're with Hekla the whole time. There are no scenes that she's not in. So it feels like everything that happens is sort of being filtered through her consciousness. But I thought adding a narrator who's narrating in the third person, saying Hekla did this, Hekla did that, then she went here, then she went there. This was the first time she was ever recognized in public. That would give it an objectivity. And I thought, yeah, the kind of tension between Hekla's subjectivity and then this godlike narrator who might be like a future version of Hekla looking back on herself. I thought that would be interesting.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Before we were talking a little bit about like sacrifices that artists have to make in order to work towards their dreams. Like, what kind of sacrifices do you think those are?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience, but the biggest sacrifice I made during Hekla was I self-financed this movie. you
Yeah.
know, so I sacrificed my personal savings, which was not an easy decision to make. I went through some big life changes over the past few years. I got divorced. I sold my condo, and I decided that, and I was trying to get Hekla made, and I couldn't raise the money. And I thought, you know what? I'm in a rare position right now where I can self-finance a project because I just happen to have a chunk of change. And so I thought, if you're an artist, there's only one thing to do, and that's make art.
Mm.
So I'm going to do it by any means necessary.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a great thing to do. It's better than, punching in numbers at the office all the time. Although
Yep.
we all gotta do it. Um, there's one aspect I notice in a lot of movies where, like, you always have a scene where a woman will break down and cry in a movie, but like when a guy does it, it's kind of like frowned upon. Why do you think we have that weird sort of like look at things when it comes to emotion and performance in films?
Well, I think it's not just movies. I think in society, men are taught that it's not manly to cry. So, I think, from a young age, kids are taught, like when you're, you know, playing sports, your coach will tell you, stop crying, be a
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
so I think, unfortunately, these kind of, we're kind of forced into these narrow social roles from a young age. And it can take a long time, I think, for, to kind of unlearn what you're taught at a young age.
Yeah, especially like now in movies, like or not now in movies, but for a long time, like the guys have always been depicted as the tough ones and stuff like that. And then immediately, like when they depict a woman as that, you get all the trolls online who are like, "Oh, I don't buy that," blah blah blah. And I'm like, "All right, you try to squeeze out a kid," but
Exactly. I know,
yeah,
and it's like 40 years after Sigourney Weaver and Aliens.
yeah, exactly. Like James Cameron's the best at writing woman. It's like because you had Sigourney Weaver in Aliens. You had Sarah Connor. I can't remember the actor's name. I met her and she worked with a friend of mine in a movie. I can't remember her name, but yeah, you got those guys. Going back to this movie, there is a scene that I think Hekla was talking about a story because she was talking to this director who wanted to hear like the most interesting story about her. So she told the story about Blue Eye and younger generations. As you've gotten older, how have you viewed each generation? Because I know it definitely has kind of changed for me in a positive and negative way.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I never want to be the guy who's like yelling at clouds.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
you
I
don't want
mean,
to be Abe Simpson. Yeah.
right, right. We all kind of romanticize our own, childhoods and our own, in our own youth. But I have a lot of faith in the students that I teach. I teach film history at the college level. So most of my students are 18 to 20 years old. I guess they're Gen Z, and I feel optimistic about the future. There are a lot of young people who are politically engaged, and these are going to be the people who are running the world in a few years. And so I feel optimistic about not only how politically engaged they are, but also I think cinephilia has made a comeback
Mhm.
amongst Gen
Yeah.
Z, because I think the millennials, uh, and this is going to sound controversial, but I think a lot of millennials, they grew up on Marvel, so they
Mhm.
either became Marvel, fanboys, or they just stopped caring about movies. Like my
Mhm.
partner now is 31 years old, and she doesn't watch movies. She just
Mm.
doesn't care.
Wow.
Yeah, like because she was, I think, 13 when, Iron Man came out in 2008. So she just thought, this is not something I'm interested in. However, I think Marvel, went into decline during the pandemic.
Mhm.
They used to crank those movies out, like there would be a couple a month, it seemed like. Not just Marvel, but just superhero films.
Just like comic book, yeah, in
Like comic
general,
book
like
movies,
either
like
as Marvel or DC,
they
yeah.
were just grinding them out, month
Yeah.
after month, every month, year after year. And then I think during the pandemic, you have this whole new generation of people who came up who didn't grow up on that stuff.
Mhm.
And I think, a lot of them were watching movies at home and were, being adventurous in terms of what they chose to watch, because they're watching movies online. They're like downloading movies, sometimes from, sites where it might not be legal, but
Yarg, matey.
but that kind
Yeah.
of that allows people to be curious. The internet can be a positive thing. So I know I'm kind of rambling here, but
No, no.
I do want to make the point that I've seen cinephilia come back in a way that is really exciting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who also are getting Marvel fatigue because it's like
Yeah,
literally the same movie every time. Like, okay, Act One, introduce the main character and the villain. Act Two, filler. Act Three, big climactic like action scene.
big
And I think,
climactic action scene, like a witty one-liner that has to follow the
yeah,
action. It's just a formula, and they just repeated it too many times.
yeah. I mean, it all was downhill after Star Wars, and I'm a Star Wars fan, but even I'm just like, yeah, but that was kind of like because Jaws was a big hit, but it
Yeah,
was nothing compared to what Star Wars was. And
that's
once that
right.
came out, Hollywood went, okay, we're
Yeah.
just gonna make this now, like
Well,
just
Jaws
you
was
know,
the first summer blockbuster. That was the
yeah,
first movie to be released in the summertime when the kids are home from school, and it was the
yeah,
movie everybody could go and watch. And it's a genre film. It's like kind of a horror movie, but it's also family friendly in a way.
yeah,
Good
yeah.
movie to watch on vacation. And so that kind of led to Star Wars, and Star Wars led to this state of decadence that we're experiencing today.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't get a lot of David Lynch's anymore, and
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
and he was great. He's like one of the few filmmakers where he could make something that makes no sense, but that's what's so awesome about it because he has an intentionality there. He's not just, being like, "Woohoo, you don't know what it means." Like you
right.
actually like see there's a reason behind the work which makes you want to re-examine it, and it's best that he doesn't tell you what it means. There was a great scene where Elizabeth was doing an interview with Blake, and he said he didn't believe in headshots or resumes, which I was kind of like, yeah, I kind of agree with that because like the resume is good, but it's like, oh, here's my headshot. I see what you look like, but it's more like I want to meet someone, but like, what's your process in finding the right actor? Is it just what's on the paper, or like what you see when they come to you?
I would rather talk to them to get a
Yeah.
sense of their personality. I like to interview the actors before they read, kind of just find out where they're from and what they like and don't like, and because when you get a sense of the real personality of the person, I think that's useful because those are the same qualities that you want to tap into oftentimes. But having said all that, I mean, I think it's pretentious of Blake, the director, to say that he doesn't believe in headshots.
Right. Right.
So it's like one thing to not care about him, but to be like, put that away. That's a
Yeah.
little that's a little pretentious.
Yeah, a little. And he kind of had like a pretentious attitude, but but at least he kind of like cared and wanted to do something different. Because
Yeah,
like you get your filmmakers who they're like, oh, I'm gonna make another horror movie. Like, okay, great. And then you get your filmmakers who they think they're gonna reinvent the wheel when they're not. And then you get your guys who are grounded, where it's just like, I want to tell a good story.
yeah.
You get a lot of people like that. And so I think at one point in the movie, they were talking about what it's like to be a reflective person. Are you a reflective person? And then at what point do you stop thinking and you say to yourself, okay, now I can actually go out and make a movie or do something?
It's funny that you ask that. I put that dialogue in the script because it's the kind of thing that I do think about. Uh, I think I'm more like Hekla, to be honest with you. I love to work.
Yeah.
And, to me, the doing is the thing. I've been very prolific as a filmmaker since I shot my first feature, Cool Apocalypse, in the summer of 2014.
Hmm.
So that was less than 12 years ago.
Yeah.
And in that span of less than 12 years, I've written and directed and released 5 feature films
Wow.
plus 2 short films. So, and that's including having to take a year off for the first year of COVID, because we had to
Mhm.
push um, we had to push the shooting of Hekla back a year, or the shooting of Relative back a year during COVID. So I think when you're working that much, you don't have time to reflect on what you're doing. It's only when you're done and you're looking back that you can take the time to do that. And I'm a person of action.
Yeah. How hard do you think it is for an actor to put on a performance? Not even just for actor, but for people in general. We're not just talking about like when you go to the audition and you have to say the lines and convince the audience you feel something, but every day we have to mask and put on a big smile and act like everything's okay when it's really not. How do you think that idea of the actor trying to make everyone like them so they can, get hired for a film, and a person who's trying to do the same thing is similar?
God, you're so right. I mean, we're all acting all the time, right? I
Yeah.
mean, when you go on a job interview, you're going to act very different than you do when you're hanging out with your, friends.
Yeah.
um, and you're putting. It doesn't mean you're not being truthful, but you're choosing to put forth a version of yourself,
Yeah.
or a side of yourself that is different than, you know, the sides of yourself that you're going to show off at other points during the day. So yeah, that's another fascinating thing about actors. They do what we all do, but they do it in a more extreme way. I think
Yeah.
they literally become other people. Um, and that also goes back to the hustle, because Hekla is not only playing characters. She reads an Oscar Wilde monologue with a British accent. At the end, she plays Lady Macbeth on stage. So she's inhabiting different characters, but she's also, you're right, through the audition process, she's trying to sell herself.
Mhm.
So that's why it was so important to me that she goes into the bathroom and changes. And not only does she change her clothes, she puts, nail polish on, because she thinks that will appeal to the next casting director. So that's another form of performance.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, this is a funny one. Maybe I should ask it because at this point, you don't like the term douche?
Well, it's not that I dislike it.
Yeah.
I use the term to refer to people. But
Yeah, I use it for the president a bunch of times. But yeah.
same.
Yeah. So at one point Hecla runs into a teacher that made a big impact on your life. Was there a teacher in your life that made a big impact? And you don't have to name them, but who was that and what do they do for you if they did?
Oh, I'll name her. When I was in 6th grade, I had a teacher named Miss Darden, Darden, Virginia Darden, and she really inspired me with a love of literature.
Mm.
We read The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, in that class, and she would have the best post reading discussions.
Mm.
She would really force us to kind of dig into the reading, and so I've been a lifelong fan of reading and writing ever since.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Do you think everyone that strives to be recognized by what do you think happens? Because a lot of people want to be famous. Like Hecla wants to, in some form, be recognized and famous.
Yeah.
But then she has this moment where someone does recognize her and she felt odd and she didn't want to be recognized. How do you think that sort of cycle of lack of a better term, third time I'm using it tonight, ego works where, someone wants something, they want that fame, then they get it, but it doesn't make them like much happier than they thought it would. Or maybe it does.
Right. I mean, it's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Hecla, the scene from the movie you're talking about, you're right. She's acting. She wants applause. She actually says early on, if I don't hear some applause soon, I'm going to scream.
Mhm.
Um, so she, wants fame to a certain extent, but then the very first time she's recognized, it kind of creeps her out. And so that scene is immediately followed by the narrator, played by the great Wendy Roby, basically saying that fame is a bargain. You're basically giving up your privacy. And I'll tell you another dirty secret about this movie. Wendy Roby herself wrote that dialogue.
Mm.
She she didn't write it in the traditional sense. That was a text she sent me. She was talking about herself and
Mhm.
how she feels like fame is a bargain, because she really holds her privacy to be sacred. And I think it's disturbing for her to be recognized from Twin Peaks. So so she and I were just having a conversation about that. And I said, "Hey, Wendy, can I put this in the movie?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, sure. If you think it'll be helpful, use whatever you want." So with
Yeah.
her permission, that text ended up becoming dialogue.
Yeah. Um, it's funny that you were talking earlier about how we just watch like Marvel movies now, but some people are gravitating towards towards more cinephile tastes. Do you think we're gravitating towards a more and more uncultured society, or do you think there'll always be a thirst for art out there?
I think there will always be a thirst for art, but also, I mean, I don't think movies have to be art house in order to be
Yeah.
great. I think what I've been excited by in American cinema in the past couple of years are Hollywood films. To be
Hmm.
honest with you, I thought last year was the best year for Hollywood studio filmmaking in decades.
Hmm. Yeah.
Decades, because I loved One Battle After Another.
Oh
I
yeah.
thought that
I've seen
was
it 4 times. Yeah.
I saw it 3 times in the theater. I
Yeah.
loved Marty Supreme.
Oh yeah.
I
The
love
music's awesome. Daniel
Yeah,
Laughton's scores just
it was
slaps.
so good, and, those are big budget films. I mean, those are
Yeah.
studio films. A24 produced Marty Supreme, and, Warner Brothers produced One Battle After Another, and then Sinners on top of that.
Yeah.
I wasn't totally on board with Sinners,
Same. Yeah.
but I do recognize it's a highly original film
Mhm.
made by a guy who's really talented, and it's a big swing, and I thought it was cool that
Yeah.
film
Yeah.
did as well as it did. So I think we could be on the verge of a new golden age. I hope to see more films like that, because none of those films are based on a pre-existing property, except for One Battle After Another is very loosely based on a novel called Vineland. But
Yeah. 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 I would
basically,
guess in Vineland they didn't have the stuff they have today in it, but yeah, that movie is great. It's like one of my favorite, like, kind of unintentional comedies of the year. Just the whole semen demon scene is just gold. Yeah. But yeah, so I guess the last question relating to the film is how did you land on Elizabeth Sam for the lead? I know you talked a little bit about how you guys wrote the movie together and worked together. How did you find her for it? Did you like already know her or work with her before or
yeah.
something like that?
Well, she was in Relative, so
Hmm.
I had worked with her on that film, and we got along like a house on fire. I thought she was just really, really, really funny, um, and really hardworking too. I mean, I told her to watch films to prepare for Relative, and she took that very seriously. And so I think, and also like she does a British accent in one scene in Relative, and she had never done that before. Because I asked her, I said, have you ever done a British accent? She goes, no, but I can learn one for the movie. Like, that was her response. And so when you work with someone like that, it makes you feel like you can throw anything at them the next time around. So like, for instance, in Hekla, she sings a song. Liz does not sing. She just doesn't do that. And I think she's pretty great in the film, because she trained, like she hired a vocal coach who gave her lessons. And like, I don't know, that's the kind of performer that I want to work with, is someone who takes the assignment as seriously as she does.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming on. Hekla, I'm gonna have you tell us when we can see it and where, so I don't screw it up. So
Yes.
take it away, Mike.
So Hekla will have its Chicago premiere this Sunday night at the Music Box Theater. That's Sunday, May 10th at 7 p.m.
Excellent. And yeah, guys, if you haven't been in the music box, go check it out. It's a great way to meet people. And I love the small sort of art community scene that there is in Chicago, because you don't get that in New York or LA. So Mike, thanks so much for coming on. It's director Michael Glover Smith for Hekla, releasing this Sunday at the Music Box Theater in Chicago, Illinois, if you live there. So go check it out. And if you liked what you saw, listen to, whatever, go to YPA Reviews. The YPA stands for You'll Probably Agree, and you'll find the website with all the stuff that you'll need to follow me there. All right, folks, have a great one. And exit.